build
Keir
on.
Starmer, a pledge is not an indication. A pledge is a word, is your word. It's a pledge.
Bit collective
it's
action.
Not in your pledge.
Well, the pledge is 3 lines, Andrew. You're asking me for more detail and I'm giving it to you.
Well, but the fact is the 2016 Trade Union Act, when it comes to cribbing and curtailing union power, is not the key legislation. Because you're hiding behind the process.
No, the Labour Party
Why
said...
don't you do what the other candidates do and tell... Don't Labour members have a right, as they decide whether to vote for you or not, they want... So can I bring you back to my question? What would Labour do?
Well, we've already talked about, I mean, some of the taxation decisions that the government have made around inheritance tax, capital gains tax, corporation tax, where you've given away money. Okay. This is what Jeremy was talking about in Prime Minister's question today. You've given away money that actually, quite frankly, we need to spend. And it's not just about an ageing population. That is phony. People know about the ageing population for some time. We've cut the criteria so people can't get community care. We treat our older people at the moment like dogs. It's a disgrace. We shouldn't do that.
But, excuse
we should
me,
be investing and putting the money in the primary care
Would you
services.
reverse the cuts on corporation tax?
I think that the cuts on corporation tax are missing a point because we need that money. We need that money at the moment.
Would you reverse it?
In the purest form of political obliteration, Andrew Neil turned Starmer and Angela Rayner into a masterclass of public disassembly. 1 second they were repeating rehearsed lines with robotic precision. The next Neil tore through them like a hurricane in a china shop, Starmer blinking as if his own script had gone rogue, Rayner firing back with defiant quips. Yet Neil pressed on with relentless facts, sharp critique and scolding scrutiny, leaving the stage in a whirlwind of unplanned chaos. Hold on tight.
It's still not a huge fan of NATO by any means, and I think that's danger for a wider Europe. At a time when Olaf Scholz in Germany is already part of the walking wounded, and now Macron is a lame duck, to have a government in Paris that is not a fan of NATO and has a soft spot for Russia, where does the leadership come from? Because I tell you this, it isn't going to come from Keir Starmer, who is a novice when it comes to geopolitics and foreign
policy. Would you reverse them?
I think that at the moment, cutting at a time where we need those services and people need those services is the wrong decision to
make. But I'm
make.
asking you, would you reverse the cut in corporation tax?
But I'm telling you, Andrew, that our priority is
you're not telling me the question.
I am. I'm saying that the cuts in corporation tax, the cuts in inheritance tax, the cuts in capital gains tax.
But what's the cut in capital gains tax?
But what's really important, Andrew...
No, excuse me, I'm asking you a question. What's the cut in the capital gains tax?
They've cut the capital gains tax. They did that. They did that as part of the coalition government.
No, they raised the capital gains tax.
Keir Starmer once pledged to bring integrity back to British politics. A promise about as likely to succeed as claiming a salad could bail out a sinking ship. Well-intentioned, laughably naive, and entirely pointless. And just when the Labour Party seemed incapable of any further dullness, Angela Rayner steps in, brandishing her working-class bona fides like a 2005 Primark receipt, somehow surviving 5 wash cycles during the chaos of a Brexit referendum.
There are a lot of fundamental issues which need to be tackled in our country. A lot of them are allowed just to atrophy under the Conservatives. They ran out of any reforming zeal. But given the scale of problems that we face, from health to infrastructure and so on, he just doesn't have the...
Then comes Andrew Neil, the political bloodhound incarnate, a man who treats spin like a stubborn infestation. He doesn't just ask questions, he methodically dissects careers, syllable by syllable. And Keir Starmer wandered straight into that intellectual meat grinder like someone convinced they could sail through a revolving door without ever giving it a turn.
Tough gig for the Chancellor, but I think she's taking a much bigger gamble than people realise. In her spring statement, which is only 3 months ago, less than that, the Chancellor said that you couldn't tax and borrow your way to prosperity and better public services. But that is...
Starmer's vision of strong leadership, muttering indistinct pledges while staring into the political void, auditioning to be the human incarnation of wallpaper. No policies, no fire, just the soft drone of bureaucratic monotony. And yet, even as the Tories hurtle forward like a self-immolating clown car, Labour under Starmer still polls like a charity raffle ticket at a billionaire's golf tournament.
If you really want to know how to fix the things in the organisation that aren't working, ask your junior staff. And I asked them 2 questions routinely. The first was, what's the biggest challenge that you've got every day you do your job? And the second, when's the last time your manager said thank you to you? And that was really revealing. And it was such an insight into how you lead.
Then there's Angela Rayner, the self-styled voice of the working class, dropping in with political poetry that somehow feels like Karl Marx recast through the prism of Love Island. Her strategy? Smack the Tories with words longer than 3 syllables, because nothing says revolution quite like a thesaurus and an ASBE.
What is the Deputy Prime Minister's definition of working people?
The definition of working people are the people that the Tory party have failed for the last 14 years.
Well, the Deputy Prime Minister stood on a manifesto promising not to raise taxes on working people. It now appears she can't even define who working people are. So I'll give her another go. There are 5 million small business owners in this country. Are they working people?
I don't know how the shadow Deputy Prime Minister can stand there with a straight face when it was the small businesses, the working people of this country that paid the price of them crashing the economy, sending interest rates scoring. I think he needs to learn.
Andrew Neil metaphorically sat them down, because let's face it, Starmer wouldn't consent to a real interview without a fire escape and plausible deniability. But the roasting began anyway. Neil didn't just interrogate Starmer, he slow roasted him with the calm, surgical intensity usually reserved for your worst enemy at a family barbecue. First on the chopping block, Starmer's grand vision, a Britain supposedly transformed by sheer spreadsheet enthusiasm. He radiates the charisma of a Microsoft Excel tutorial and the leadership instincts of a malfunctioning GPS. 1 minute it's make Brexit work, the next respect the referendum, then negotiate like grown-ups, all while blinking like someone who just lost Wi-Fi in a tunnel of poor decisions. Armed with receipts longer than Rayner's expense claims, Neil tore through Starmer's flip-flopping faster than a cheap IKEA shelf in a flood, invoking his tenure as Director of Public Prosecutions, the so-called crown jewel of his Labourism, a period when he allegedly championed law and order, except, naturally, when he stood sideways, backward, or not at all.
So pious and sanctimonious about the Tories when they were in opposition, and they had plenty to have a go at on the Tories, no question about that. But it's now come back to bite them. The Sue Gray thing, I think, is a bit more worrying because it suggests that Keir Starmer doesn't have control of Downing Street in the way he should. And of course, that brought Boris Johnson down. He didn't have control of Downing.
You know you've officially lost the plot when Andrew Neil starts reading your own manifesto back at you like it's evidence in a criminal trial. Starmer blinked, metaphorically, naturally. He always blinks. It's less a facial tic and more his entire ideology having a nervous breakdown. Then came public spending. Starmer wants to fund the NH, improve education, lower crime, boost infrastructure, hug a tree, pet a dog, and somehow keep taxes lower than Rishi Sunak's chances of winning a dance-off. Magic money tree? Try a fantasy forest where unicorns hand out free childcare and inflation-proof dreams. Angela Rayner, deputy leader and human mic drop, seems convinced that shouting louder improves policy. Her headline contribution to the budget debate, blaming the rich for everything short of stealing her parking spot. She appears to think the economy can be rebuilt by taxing billionaires until they explode into parcels of social justice. Neil gently reminded her that even taxing the wealthy into oblivion wouldn't fund her promises for more than a long weekend. Her response? Blame the patriarchy and double down on the hope that nobody notices Labour hasn't released a fully costed manifesto since Ed Miliband tried wooing voters with a stone tablet.
Saying, Andrew, and
No, what you're saying is wrong. They raised the capital gains tax to 28%.
What I'm saying is that they've given tax cuts to absolutely the richest in the country at the same time where they've told the poorest people in this country over the past, it is true, at the same time that you've told the people in this country over the last 6 years, we've got to cut our coffee. No, let me finish this point because...
And speaking of costings, let's dive into Labour's Grand Green Energy Plan, a scheme so vague you could mistake it for a horoscope. Starmer insists it will create jobs, cut emissions, save the planet, and probably improve everyone's Wi-Fi, while the actual details hide somewhere between a consultant's PowerPoint and a black hole of accountability. Rayner, meanwhile, calls the plan ambitious, which is like labelling Elon Musk quirky. Ambition without clarity is just glitter bombs and disappointment. Even Neil, usually carved from granite, arched an eyebrow so sharply it nearly filed its own FOIA request. Then there's party discipline. Starmer claims to be the adult in the room, yet his front bench behaves like a soap opera cast, scripted by interns on Red Bull. Shadow ministers contradict each other as if it's a team-building exercise, and policy announcements get retracted faster than Tory apologies. Starmer's approach to leadership? Silence. Majestic, awkward, prolonged silence, as if hoping that not speaking will disguise the fact that Labour is still wandering the ideological desert like a hungover Moses armed only with a focus group.
I think the worry is that if you end up with this Labour supermajority, as some people are saying there will be, that they'll ram through changes, whether that's votes at 16, the levels of taxes they want to bring forward, the pensions they want to raise, their energy policies, which I think would be really disastrous for this country. So what we're saying is there's thousands of people across the country who can make a huge difference. So when it comes to July the 4th, your vote does matter, and we'd like you to vote Conservative. I do think it's really important that lots of people across the country are really worried about what Labour would do, whether that's the fact that they won't commit to defence spending, whether it's their plans of energy which are going to raise people's bills, or the fact they will raise taxes and raise your pension. Lots of people are concerned, and for those people they might think the election is a foregone conclusion, but it's not, and actually it is just a handful of people across the country who can make a huge difference.
Meanwhile, Angela Rayner's leadership strategy seems to be grabbing every microphone as if it owes her rent, charging into interviews like a boxer with a sociology degree, armed with half-memorised stats and moral outrage so intense it deserves its own postcode. Strip away the theatrics, and what remains is loud, righteous, echoing vagueness. Andrew Neil didn't even break a sweat. Rayner and Starmer melted under basic scrutiny like wax figures in the sun. He tackled Labour's immigration stance, a policy so slippery it might as well be in witness protection. Starmer promises fairness, firmness and humanity, but delivers ambiguity, hesitation and the political equivalent of a shrug emoji. Then, law and order. Despite Starmer's former role heading public prosecutions, Labour's crime policy reads like an incoherent cocktail of buzzwords, unfunded pledges and optimistic graphs. More bobbies on the beat, courtesy of those magic billionaires who apparently cough up solutions like. Political piatas. Neil also exposed Labour's U-turns on tuition fees, nationalisation and anything requiring a firm position. Because Starmer's preferred stance is every stance. A one-man policy buffet offering something for everyone and satisfying no one. He can't be pinned down, not out of cunning, but because he's politically Teflon and infinitely less thrilling.
And can't afford any more of the Conservatives. And he seems to have lost count. The answer is a quarter. Only a quarter of the billions of pounds of taxpayers' money lost to fraud is expected to be clawed back. If this government can't get the public money back, they can't be trusted with.
Angela Rayner tried to anchor Labour with her Working Class Hero Act, but let's remember she's now firmly part of the establishment she claims to be smashing: designer handbags, tax-funded expenses and front row seats at every staged pub visit photo op. It's the new face of class warfare, gentrified rebellion. While Starmer meticulously polishes his neutral expression, Rayner is retweeting motivational slogans as if rehearsing for a TED Talk titled "How to Yell About Injustice While Wearing Gucci." If Labour were a Netflix series, Starmer would be the slow burn political drama nobody makes it past episode 3, and Rayner the chaotic subplot that accidentally earns a spin-off for sheer entertainment. Andrew Neil didn't take them down with shouting, he did it with surgical precision. Like a cat toying with mice, he dropped fact after fact, exposing contradictions as if peeling an onion of mediocrity. Starmer's record? Inconsistent. Policies? Incoherent. Passion? MIA since 2020. Rayner tried to compensate by turning up the volume, but when Neil demanded specifics, her answer boiled down to "Trust us, we're not the Tories." A pitch that's only compelling if your standard for leadership is merely not currently on fire.